Hi, my name is Gina Becker. I'm with Contigo Counseling and Coaching Services, and I'm here to talk about trauma. When we are children, oftentimes we don't realize that we are being traumatized. We may even grow into adulthood and still not recognize that that was trauma, that was abuse. I want to talk about the different types of abuse or trauma that you may have experienced. And we'll explore them deeper as we go along. But let's go ahead and talk briefly about the three types that I want to go ahead and bring up. So the first one is neglect, and it could be emotional neglect, where there is an inability or availability to the child. Okay, so oftentimes the parent just does not want to know what's happening with the child. The child is often trying to express there's something going on. Maybe the child is crying and the child is ignored. Uh, maybe there is pain going on, both physical or emotional or even mental pain, and that is being ignored. Or snuffed out. So, for example, oftentimes when you see a baby, an infant, who is crying and suffering, and they may be, first, crying because they have a need, which babies do, okay, and so they should be attended to, and the caretaker or the parent should go and find out what that is. Okay. And so the uh, child is taken care of and soothed. If the baby is hungry, they, they kind of shudder and you start to feed them after you hold them and uh, start to feed them, and they might shudder and catch their breath, and they start to feel soothed. Okay. Um, that is caretaking and addressing the need. When that does not happen, the child eventually begins to be still and doesn't even cry out, and just starts to, pretty much uh, not really cry out at all, because they have already adapted to the neglect, and will realize that nobody's going to come if I cry out. And you probably heard stories about that, and again, we'll visit that deeper, and on a deeper level in the future. Okay. So sometimes the parent doesn't want to know. Sometimes the parent is preoccupied. I mentioned before that that these may be inherited behaviors. So oftentimes that's what's going on. Okay. Uh, and the child is basically just ignored. That's in infancy. There's other areas as well. Okay. So abandonment is another form of childhood trauma, and this is when little time is spent with the child or quality time. For example, oftentimes there is neglect in the sense of bonding. There is, you should have some type of bonding going on in a family system, and one that is dysfunctional or toxic or both, which usually they are. um, there's not that ability to bond. Okay, so there's no lack of affection. There's a lack of of uh, of just interaction and socializing. Okay, So sometimes it's because the parents are, both working. Maybe they are doing drugs. Um, and as you can probably figure this out, oftentimes a child that is abandoned is also being emotionally neglected, okay, as well as physically neglected. I didn't talk about the physical neglect where the child is not being fed. I kind of glossed over that, and gave the example of the baby not being addressed, baby's needs not being addressed. So that would be uh, compound trauma. Okay. So the third one is physical or sexual abuse. Physical is when the child is being beaten, maybe scapegoated and tortured. There might be, just inappropriate uh, discipline and spanking, beating. Really, it's not spanking; it's beating. Where the parent is out of control. The parent is not trying to teach the child. The parent is abusing the child and expressing anger or frustration uh, over that child's behavior. And oftentimes it's even deeper than that. It's not really even about the child. It's about the parent that has a problem. So that is something that is also a form of abuse. Okay. And that would be physical abuse. Of course, sexual abuse is fondling, uh, voyeurism. Uh, and voyeurism is when you are, uh, you know, uh, watching the child while they're naked or undressing or dressing, wanting to catch a glimpse, Um, uh, there's also exploitation, where the child is being exploited for favors, not necessarily full-blown sexual, but the child is told to sit on the the perpetrator's lap. Um, and I do want to point out that there are women and men who are pedophiles. So oftentimes, I'm going to take a little bit a side note. Men are overlooked for their child, their reception, or their them receiving child sexual abuse from female perpetrators. And that is really considered uncommon, but I don't think it's as uncommon um, as they make it out. Experts make it out to be, or statistics report, because a man is more prone to hide the abuse, and because of the way we um, uh, groom or our culture uh, dictates to a male how they should respond. They don't always report, and when they do, if they don't really want to report, because then they're considered sissies or something like that, and that's an old word, but sorry, that's all I could come up with. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in the future. But the point is that there's an underreported amount of abuse happening to males, both by female and male perpetrators. So then there's also, I mentioned fondling. There's things like the grooming process, which is also sexual abuse. The grooming process is just as much a part of the sexual abuse. And the grooming process is really kind of getting that child uh, ready, groomed for more. Okay. And the sexual abuse begins to escalate into full blown uh, some type of sexual act. Okay. So, and assault. Okay. So I want to go ahead and point out that um, there are 6 psychological wounds that occur. And if you are experiencing any of these, then most likely you have been abused in childhood. Okay, so I want you to take a deep breath and begin to uh, just stay with me and listen to what I'm saying. And if any of them makes, kind of hit the mark for you, leave a comment. We can talk about this. Okay. And again, I want to go ahead and point out that I am having some groups that are going to be starting soon. And you will be assessed if you are interested for whether or not you're a good candidate for Zoom or in-person groups. Okay, so um, this is very important that you address this if you want to resolve these issues, and there are some very complex issues that result from this. Psychological wounds could be fragmented personality, okay, uh, excessive guilt and shame, excessive fear, like hypervigilance. It seems like it comes from nowhere. Fear about everything sometimes. Um, Not being able to go anywhere. Excessive shame leads to a lot of self-doubt, low self-esteem, self-harm. I mentioned this in previous videos. A fragmented personality is you don't know who you are. You don't know uh, you don't know your core person. Okay. Then there's a distortion of reality. You'll tend to deny a lot of things. Everything was great, everything was wonderful. Maybe not on all levels, but for this part it was great. And then there's projection. Okay. There's trust issues, and that's trust with self. You don't trust yourself, your own judgment, and you don't trust others. This was a big one for me. As a matter of fact, all of them were. And but I remember being really young, and I did not trust my judgment of people. I did not want anybody around me because I couldn't really decipher who they were, because I didn't know who I was, and I knew something wasn't right, and so I didn't trust anybody, and I didn't trust myself. So that would be an example, and I'll get into more detail in the future with future videos. Okay. There's also the inability to bond. So this leads to attachment problems. If your perpetrator was a caretaker, it's very confusing, and so you don't know how to respond to that person or any other person that you want to, that you're in a relationship with, that you a parent or a caretaker. So what happens is you don't know how to bond or respond or to attach to that relationship or to that person in a relationship. And so there's a lot of problems there. Okay. I had a mother who was abused, and she did not know how to hold myself and my siblings, to give affection, and to just to love on us. Okay. And so when I had my own children, I really struggled with holding them and loving them. And so purposely I went against my inherited instincts to push to push away. And purposely I nursed my babies. I would hold my babies. I would purposely spend time with my babies, interacting, playing games, patty cake, reading books, whatever, just to bond, and to try to do my best to break that cycle. Okay, and you can too. Okay, um, I'm not going to say I'm perfect, and there's still a whole lot of learning going on, but that is one way that you can do. You can break that cycle. So, a more severe uh, experience uh, would lead to dissociation again. I've talked about that before, where you go into a totally different world, and you step out and allow another part of yourself to take over and just live the life, because otherwise you would not be able to survive. Okay, so there's again, going back to one of my earlier videos, there are many levels of trauma. Okay, so again, if I'm answering some questions or raising some questions, leave some comments, and we'll talk about some more soon.